Hi everyone, welcome back. Beck's here today to talk about some books that I have acquired since I looked. My last book haul was in June, which is kind of crazy that I've been accumulating books since June, but I still only have 7 books to talk about. I feel like I've been really good the last number of months, only getting books that I'm really excited for. I missed my library's local book sale in the fall because I was in Vermont visiting my parents. They moved up the date and I didn't realize it. So I missed that. So that's also probably part of the reason why this book haul isn't bigger, is because I didn't go to that book sale. But anyway, I have 7 books here that I'm still really excited to have, and I want to share them with you. So let's get started. The first one is another Royal Diaries book. I love finding these in thrift stores. This one I actually did find in Goodwill when I was visiting my parents, so it kind of made up for not being able to go to my local library's book sale, but I found Isabel, Jewel of Castilla from Spain, 1466. This is now the 7th Royal Diaries book that I've managed to find since I first spotted Elizabeth I a couple years ago now. So every time I see one of these in a Goodwill or Value Village, I just get so excited, especially when they're in decent condition. I did find one more recently that looked like it had been crushed, so I didn't end up buying that one. But this one also in great condition. I don't recall ever having read this one. It's possible I did when I was little, but either way, I am excited to have it. All of these books have beautiful end papers, so here's the one for Isabel, and I will add this to my stack. Of the bunch that I have, I've read 4 of them, and now I have 3 that I need to read/reread, but always so excited to find these. That's part of the thrill of going to the thrift stores these days, is just seeing if I happen to spot a Royal Diaries book. This second book is one I've been wanting to get my hands on for about a year now, because around a year ago I read To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is a novella, and it follows a small group of people on a spaceship. They have left Earth to go explore these other planets. So not only do you have this fun sci-fi element of exploring these different planets, but you also see what this does to the state of these characters. They have to go into cryo sleep. They know that when they return to Earth, it will not be the same. Their family members will no longer be alive. So it's really heavy, and she packs such a punch into this 130-page book. And so, of course, once I finished this, I really wanted to check out something else by her, and so I wanted to read the first book in the Wayfarer series. This is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Part of the reason why it took me so long to get it is that every time I happened to be in a bookstore, I would go look, and if they even had the book in the first place, they had it with the really ugly cover that I did not care for. And so I just happened to be in Indigo earlier this month, and I was like, I'll go check. I'll see if they have it. And they had it, and they had it in the cover that I liked, so I bought it. This is the first time I've bought a full price book in a long time, but that's all right. I am willing to support Becky Chambers because she impressed me so much with her first book of hers that I read anyway. It's not her first book overall, but first book of hers that I experienced. And so this one has a similar feel in that we are following a character who goes onto a ship with a few more characters than just 4, like the first one that I read. So this one has a slightly bigger cast of characters. They get offered a job to build, it's a hyperspace tunnel, and so they have to decide if they want to take this job because it will basically set them up to be comfortable for many, many years. And in order to get to that place, they have to travel across the war-torn universe. And I imagine there's going to be so many great things that they're going to experience. Great for a reader, not great for the character necessarily, but great for me as a reader. Have that sci-fi element, but also really have the relationships between these characters, finding out their histories. And this is part of a series. So assuming I really like this, I'll have a little bit more to read, which is great. This was another thrift store find, which I was really happy about. It is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I have not read an Emily Henry book yet. This is one of the ones that I've heard more good things about. She has some other ones that I've heard shakier reviews of, but this one, I think every time someone has mentioned it, everyone's at least liked it, if not loved it. And so I thought for $3.29, yes, I will buy this book. So this one follows Nora, I think her name is, yes, Nora, Nimura, and she's a literary agent in the big city, and she's finally convinced to take a long vacation by her sister, who she loves very much. And they go to North Carolina together to what I assume is a small town. And instead of potentially finding some cute guy who, you know, has a farm in this small town or like runs the local bookshop or whatever, she ends up running into an editor that she knows in the city named Charlie. And the two of them really butt heads, it seems. But perhaps they can kind of start a new level to their relationship. Maybe talk a little bit more, get to know each other a little bit better. And that is the romance side of this book. I'm not typically a romance reader, but when I see a book enough times, especially something like this, I'm intrigued enough to pick it up. It's worth a try, in my opinion. I'm about to give you book haul whiplash because we're going from a contemporary romance book to some very serious Canadian nonfiction. This is Highway of Tears, a true story of racism, indifference, and the pursuit of justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls by Jessica McDiarmid. This is a book that I had never heard of before. I've heard of the Highway of Tears, but I'd never heard of this book, and I spotted it in Goodwill and realized that this is a really good book for me to read. For those of you who don't know, the Highway of Tears refers to an isolated stretch of highway in northern British Columbia where a number of Indigenous women and girls have gone missing over many, many years. So I've been aware of this for a long time, but I've never read anything that specifically focuses on it. So this is both a true crime book and also a social sciences book. And I am always looking for books that touch on those subjects that are very Canadian focused. At the end of last year, I read Seven Fallen Feathers, which was about 7 Indigenous students that died over a number of years in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And that book, while focusing on those individual students, also looked at the bigger picture in Canada's treatment of Indigenous peoples. So I imagine there will be a lot of tie-ins to that bigger picture with this book, but also focusing more specifically on the women who have disappeared or been murdered along this highway. Next, I have some more nonfiction. I have The Doctors Blackwell, How Two Pioneering Sisters Brought Medicine to Women and Women to Medicine by Janice P. Nimura. I think this one first got on my radar because of the BookTube prize. I was hoping that it would end up being in one of the rounds that I read for in the specific group that I was assigned, but that never ended up happening. And then I spotted this in the bargain section of the local bookstore, so I thought, perfect time, let's pick it up. This book combines 2 different things that I enjoy. The first is women's history, following particular women that we may have never heard about before. In this case, we're following Elizabeth and Emily Blackwell. Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman in America to earn an MD. Her sister Emily soon followed in her footsteps, and the 2 of them opened a hospital together that was entirely staffed by women. So that, on its own, is intriguing. And second of all, it's medical nonfiction, and I love medical nonfiction. So combine those 2 things together and we have what could potentially be a very interesting book to me. I have heard shakier reviews of this one, so I'm hoping that with the 2 topics that it really looks at, I will end up really enjoying it. The last 2 books that I have to talk about go together. So the first one is Dolls of Our Lives, Why We Can't Quit American Girl by Mary Mahoney and Allison Horrocks. I learned about this book from Olive, over in Book Olive. She was talking about upcoming releases, and this was one of the ones that she mentioned, and I was immediately intrigued by this because I grew up with American Girls. I remember getting the catalogs, flipping through them for the particular dolls and all the accessories and everything. And then I also read a lot of the more nonfiction books that they had, just about like growing up, being a girl, learning about your body, all that kind of stuff. So I was definitely an American Girl. So this book looks at the product that this company created specifically with the dolls. I guess there's a podcast, and this started out as a podcast, and then they ended up writing this book. So these 2 women who are both historians now, but grew up loving American Girl dolls, they kind of analyze it from looking back on something that was super popular in the 90s, and I would argue into the 2000s as well, and looking at how that kind of shaped girlhood for some people. So for me, this sounded like a perfect read because this was a big part of my childhood and I really enjoy American Girl dolls. I actually have 2 of the story collections. So these books I already owned. This is not technically hauled, but so I had Kirsten and Kit, and these were the 2 dolls that I had growing up, and I got these beautiful story collections at some point. Each of the dolls have a number of stories about them, and these are just all of them collected into one. And when I learned about the podcast, I learned that they started with Felicity, and they go through all of the books for each of the dolls and analyze them from a historical perspective, you know, looking back at maybe what the stories said then versus how we as a society are now, things like that. And I was immediately interested. Immediately sounds like something I would enjoy. Because I've been having so much fun with rereading or reading for the first time the Royal Diaries books, I thought maybe the American Girl doll books would be really fun to do as well, especially in tandem with this podcast. So I was looking at my local library, kind of seeing, they don't have the American Girl doll books here. It's Canada. Like it just didn't have the same grip on society here, obviously. So then I was looking on eBay and secondhand bookstores and just on the internet, just seeing what I could find. And I eventually found a copy of Felicity's story collection that was sealed, never opened, which was key because there were many editions of these books that were clearly owned by young girls and they had been highlighted, drawn in, they weren't in the best condition. This one, sealed copy. So I asked my parents for it for Christmas and they got it for me. So thanks, Mom and Dad. This was so exciting to get because it's just something that I wouldn't necessarily ever spend the money on myself. But now I have a perfect copy of Felicity's story collection. So I can start reading this and follow along in the podcast. Eventually I'll get to Kirsten and Kit's books and yeah, maybe make it a little bit of an adventure to acquire all of these story collections as well. Felicity Merriman, her story is American Revolutionary War. I guess I should kind of explain what this is. So yeah, 1774 is the year that this takes place, and so there's 5 or 6 stories that are combined in this collection, and the first one is always meet Felicity, or meet Kirsten, meet the doll, you know, meet the girl, and kind of understand her backstory. So I will enjoy this one. I've never read Felicity stories. I've read a bunch of Molly's as well because my sister had Molly, but yeah, Kirsten and Kit were my 2 dolls and the ones that I'm most familiar with. But of course I recognize all of the dolls because I would religiously read the catalogs when they would come in. So anyway, bit of a tangent there at the end, but if you're an American Girl doll fan, you understand where I'm coming from. So if you have read any of these books that I've mentioned, if you have any thoughts on them, you can leave them in the comments down below and we can chit chat about it. Links are in the down bar if you want to friend me or follow me on Goodreads, you can do that. And as always, thank you all very much for watching and I'll see you later.